So the 2019 and 2022 Stanley Cup champions are eliminated in round 1 in game 7. We'll look at the last two teams eliminated in round 1 in this video, as we're looking at the Colorado Avalanche and the St. Louis Blues. We're looking at how their seasons finished. We'll go to all the updates when it comes to Colorado and St. Louis coming up right now. Hello everyone, welcome back to another video here at the End-to-End Hockey channel. Before we get started, don't forget to like this video and subscribe down below. Thank you for all of your support. I would never be able to do this with all of you guys. We're on the road to 500 subscribers, and don't forget to stay tuned for our June 27th, June 28th, and July 1st live streams touching on the draft and free agency. So definitely don't forget to stay tuned for those dates. But in today's video, we've got another off-season preview video here to discuss. So in today's video, we're looking at the last two teams to eliminate in round 1. That is the Colorado Avalanche and the St. Louis Blues, the 2022 and 2019 Stanley Cup champions. The Blues lost every road game en route to losing to the President's Trophy winning team, while the Avalanche were down 2-1, were down 3-2, fought their way back both times, had a lead in Game 7 of the first round, but blew in the third period and lost to Dallas. So lots of interesting stuff for these two teams. We'll start with the Avalanche, as they were eliminated a day before St. Louis. We'll start with them. They had a decent season this year, a 49-29-4 record, barely hit above the 100-point plateau, but started the season 0-4-0, so they actually finished the season 49-25-4, which is very impressive for a Colorado Avalanche team, who at the start of the season was missing a whole bunch of bodies. So very good stuff there for Colorado. Like we talked about, they got third in the Central Division. That matched them up with the Dallas Stars in a rematch of last year's second round matchup. And the Avalanche opened the series with a win, then lost back-to-back overtime games, then had a dominant win, then a dominant loss. Then they got by the skin of their teeth in Game 6 to force to Game 7, had a 2-0 lead in the third period in Game 7, but gave up 4 straight to lose to Dallas, and for the second consecutive year be ousted by the Stars, this time in round 1 instead of round 2. So very interesting stuff there. When it comes to the Avalanche, they're goal and point scoring leaders in the regular and postseason. So if you look at the Avalanche, McKinnon had a 116-point season. He was once again brilliant. I think he was one of the top 3 point scorers in the NHL, so very interesting note there. Makar had a 92-point season. I think that led all defensemen, so Makar had once again a brilliant season, but dropped off a whole bunch after that. Lehkonen was the next closest player on the team with 45 points, so very interesting note there. McKinnon and Makar definitely drove the offense on this team again. And you can even look at that in the goal scoring wise. McKinnon had 32 goals, Makar had 30 goals, Lehkonen had 27. So the only two 30-plus goal scorers were McKinnon and Makar, who's a defenseman. So Makar was definitely a huge part of this team, as was McKinnon. And they had a couple of other decent players, but nothing overly substantial. Like no one else hit 50-plus points, no one else hit 30-plus goals, so interesting note there. Let's look at their goal scoring and point scoring leaders in the playoffs. McKinnon led the team 11 points in the playoffs in only 7 games. Like he was a beast. And then Logan O'Connor had 6 points, and Necas and Makar had 5 points. So Makar was definitely not as dominant as he was in the regular season, and O'Connor and Necas had some pretty good point totals, and it's definitely better than some of those Eastern Conference teams, especially with McKinnon hitting 11, but still wasn't great enough to get them past the Stars and into round 2. When it comes to the goal scoring side, McKinnon had 7 goals in the first round series, while Lehkonen and Shushkin had 3 goals. So definitely, McKinnon was far and away the best player in the playoffs for the Avalanche, but the Avalanche actually had a couple of other 3-goal scorers, which is something that a lot of the Eastern Conference teams had trouble with. So compared to the Eastern Conference teams, it wasn't a bad series from the Avalanche offense-wise, but it wasn't overly great either. If you look at their advanced stats, they had 273 goals for, which was 6th in the NHL, and 231 goals against, which was tied for 11th in the NHL. So goals against wise in the regular season, they were a top half team, almost a top 10 team, but they were just outside the top 10, so still a pretty solid season goals against wise. With goal scoring, they were a hair outside the top 5 at 6th in the NHL goal scoring, so pretty solid season there goal scoring wise, goals against wise from the Avalanche. They were also tied for 8th in the power play with 24.8%, and they had 12th in the NHL in the penalty kill with 79.8%. So it wasn't a bad season for them in basically any of their stats in the regular season. Like they had a top 10 power play, a top 10 goal scoring team, and they were top half in the goals against and the penalty kills. So definitely want to see it maybe be a little bit better, but still they were pretty solid there. If you go over to the playoffs, they were 5th in the playoffs at this point with a 3.43 goals for per game, which isn't overly bad, but the other stats weren't overly great. Goals against wise tied for 10th with 3.00 GAA, not really great there.
Penalty kill wise, they were 69.6%, which is 12th. And power play wise, they had a 13.6% power play, 14th in the NHL, only ahead of Tampa and New Jersey. New Jersey, who didn't even have a power play goal to their name. So definitely, special teams was not overly great for the Avalanche. Goals against was one of the lower end teams in the playoffs. Goals for wise, they did pretty good, but besides that, really didn't do really good in the playoffs, and those are their advanced stats. And if you look at their team right now, they currently have $8.7 million in cap space for going off season. If you look at 3 reasons I think this team was eliminated: 1, poor special teams, as we just talked about. Special teams was a very good strong suit for this team. In the regular season, they had a 12th ranked penalty kill and a tied for 8th ranked power play. But in the playoffs, they were absolutely atrocious. They had 11% worse on the power play, and they were 10% worse on the penalty kill than they were in the regular season. Like, even though it's only a 7-game series, those are horrible numbers, and the power play was non-existent and the penalty kill was not overly great. So given those two stats, the penalty kill and power play disappear in the postseason. It's a big reason as to why this team was eliminated in round 1. Second reason, bad goaltending. Well, Blackwood didn't do atrocious. He definitely didn't do all he could to save the Colorado Avalanche. Like, they had a couple of opportunities to potentially win this series, and Blackwood definitely didn't do good. Now, this was Blackwood's first playoff experience, so you definitely expect someone like that to not do great, but still, I think Blackwood cost them a couple of points in this series, and that's why bad goaltending was the second reason. And the third reason they were eliminated was not enough depth scoring. This team did not have an abundance of depth scoring, as we just talked about. McKinnon carried this team, and guys like Leddy and Nichushkin, who are in the top 6, also produced quite well in the playoffs, but the depth was not really there for the Avalanche besides a guy like Logan O'Connor, and that was another big reason as to why this team was eliminated by Dallas. So in my opinion, poor special teams, bad goaltending, and not enough depth scoring were the 3 main reasons, in my opinion, why the Avalanche were eliminated in round 1. So those are the 3 reasons I think they were eliminated. Those are their stats. Going over to their significant pending UFAs, their RFAs, and their draft capital for this upcoming offseason. So if you look at their UFAs, they have a couple decent ones here. They have Brock Nelson, Jonathan Drouin, VC, Kiviranta, Wagner, Phillips, Johnson, Lindgren, and Rosen. Phillips and Rosen both didn't play at the NHL level this year. Could see them potentially be brought back on short-term deals. Wouldn't be surprised if they left. You have Ryan Lindgren, who had 4 goals and 22 points in 72 games, was a deadline acquisition from the Rangers. I could definitely see him potentially leave, especially with the cap constraints from Colorado. You have Eric Johnson, who had 2 goals and 5 points in 36 games as a depth defenseman. Could definitely see him be brought back by Colorado. You have Chris Wagner, who had a goal in 28 games. Decent depth guy, could see him be brought back on a short-term deal. You have guys like Kiviranta and VC, who had 5 goals and 7 points. Kiviranta, who had 16 goals and 23 points. Both were decent bottom 6 guys throughout the season for Colorado. I could definitely see one or both of those guys be brought back on short-term deals. You have Jonathan Drouin, who had 11 goals, 37 points in 43 games. I think if they can work some sort of a deal out cap-wise, I think the Avalanche would love to bring Drouin back, but I just don't know if they can do it cap-wise. And they have Brock Nelson, who had 26 goals and 56 points in 80 games, was a deadline acquisition. Fit in quite well as their second line center, so I think they want to sign him, but I'm not sure if they're going to be able to. So those are the UFAs, headlined by Lindgren, Drouin, and Nelson. If you look at their RFA side, not a whole bunch here. They have Dufour, Steinberg, Foudy, Malinsky, Ludwig, and Mandolese. Foudy, and Dufour all didn't play at the NHL level, but Dufour and Foudy are solid prospects, so I think both those guys will be brought back. You have Ludwig, who had 2 assists in 8 games, and Steinberg, who had no points in 8 games. Ludwig's a call-up option, could see him be brought back on the lower end deal. Steinberg's a solid prospect, could definitely see him be brought back. And you have Malinsky, who had 5 goals and 15 points in 76 games. Malinsky had a very solid season for Colorado Avalanche as his third pair defenseman, so I definitely think he'll be brought back. So those are the RFAs, headlined by Dufour, Steinberg, and Malinsky. Going over to the draft capital for the Avalanche is very short here. They have minimum draft picks for this upcoming draft, 2. That's it. They have their own 4th and their own 7th. That's the extent of the Colorado Avalanche's draft capital for this upcoming draft. So definitely don't have a whole bunch. They have no 1st, no 2nd, no 3rd, 5th, or 6th round picks. Now, once again, this could change before the draft happens, but at this point in time, the Avalanche only have 2 picks, so way lower than the average team, and probably a little bit lower than the team in the playoffs you expect. So very interesting note there. And lastly, going over to 5 ways I think the Avalanche can improve in the offseason to get better and maybe make a pass round 1 next year. So in my opinion, the first priority has to be either sign Brock Nelson or acquire a second line center. Like, this team could definitely use a second line center. They've been looking for a second line center since Nazem Kadri. They went through Alex Newhook. They went through Casey Middlestead. There are a couple of other guys. They can't seem to find that second line center. So Nelson fit really well, but I think his asking price might be a little bit too high for Colorado. So in my opinion, you either have to try and bring back Nelson or try and acquire a second line center. Like, I'm not sure who they could try and target. Maybe a guy like Barzal or Horvat, maybe some other players who are on the trade market. I'm not exactly sure at this point, but I think they have to have a second line center going into next season. Second thing is consider moving Josh Manson, Sam Girard, or Ross Colton. As we just talked about, this team is pressed up against the cap right now. Girard, who's making $5 million, Manson, who's making just over $4 million, and Colton, who's making $4 million, I think are all prime trade targets for the Avalanche. I could see any one of those three wind up being moved. I think they have enough prospects and could go out for cheaper defensemen that they could move one of Manson or Girard. And I think Colton could be a little more expendable now that they have a Charlie Coyle as their third line center. So we're going to have to wait and see on that, but I would say watch out for the Avalanche moving off of one of Manson, Girard, or Colton, or potentially even more. Third thing I think this team needs to do is try to extend Marty Necas. They acquired Necas for the Mikko Rantanen deal. In the regular season, he was great. Playoffs disappeared a tiny bit, but still put up 5 points in 7 games, which isn't overly bad. So if this is my Necas entering the final year of his deal, I think he'll be a UFA at the end of next offseason. So with that in mind, I think the Avalanche have to try and sign Necas. Like, I think it's a big priority for this Avalanche team, especially given the fact he was the prime piece they got from Mikko Rantanen. So I think that's priority number 3. Priority number 4 is consider giving some of their younger players a shot, whether that be Oscar Oleason, Ivan, William Dufour, or Sean Barans. Barans is a decent defensive prospect, while Dufour, Oleason, and Ivan, I think, could all be at least top 9 forwards at the NHL level. And I think with the fact that the Avalanche are pressed up against the cap, I think adding some guys on rookie deals will make some sense for the Avalanche. So I think giving those guys a shot will be priority number 4, even though it's more of a training camp thing. And the 5th priority, in my opinion, for the Avalanche has to be trying to add some defensive depth. Now, like we talked about, the Avalanche could move off a guy like Manson, could move off a guy from Girard. They could lose a guy like Ryan Lindgren in free agency. So with all of that in mind, I definitely do believe that the Avalanche will try and add some defensive depth, whether that be a guy like Brian Dumoulin, Tyson Barrie, John Merrill, or Travis Hamonic, just someone who can play on the third pair. So in my opinion, those are the 5 things I think the Avalanche should do. Either sign Nelson or acquire a second line center. Consider moving Manson, Girard, or Colton. Extend Necas. Give Oleason, Ivan, Dufour, or Barans a shot at the NHL level. And trying to add some defensive depth. I think the 5 things the Avalanche could do this offseason to try and improve and get better. Maybe make it past round 1 next year. So that's my opinion on the Avalanche as they try and make it back to the Cup final for first time since 2022. And next, going over to the St. Louis Blues. So when it comes to the St. Louis Blues, they barely snuck into the playoffs. They had a solid second half of the season, went on a complete tear, sort of like Nashville the year prior, and they snuck into the second wildcard position. Finished with a 44-30-8 record, 96 points, were tied with the Calgary Flames for the last playoff spot in the Western Conference, but because of tie-breaking procedures, they made it in. They got the President's Trophy winning Winnipeg Jets. They fell behind 2-0 in that first round series, won both games at home to make it a 2-2 series, lost game 5 on the road to fall down 3-2, won game 6 on the road to make it 3-3, then went back to Winnipeg in game 7, had a 3-1 lead with 2 minutes left in that game, but then gave up 2 goals in the last 2 minutes of that game, and after that, they wound up losing in double overtime. So the Blues had an opportunity to put away the President's Trophy winning team, go back to the second round, play Dallas again just like they did in 2019, just like they did on the route to the Cup final. And they didn't. So very interesting note there, but the Blues at least were able to make it back to the postseason. If you look at their goal scoring and point scoring leaders for the regular and postseason, regular season wise, Thomas led the team with 81 points, Kyrou was second with 70, Holloway with third with 63, while Kyrou was the team leader in goal scoring with 36, Holloway had 26, and Neighbors had 22. So when it comes down to it, we've seen worse teams offensive wise. Thomas and Kyrou both had 70 plus points, Kyrou had 30 plus goals, but still, it's not some of the best offensive performances we've seen. So decent stuff there from St. Louis. Meanwhile, in the playoffs, they were once again one of the teams who had a couple of really good point point producers. Cam Fowler, of all people, led the team in points in the playoffs with 10, while Pavel Buchnevich and Robert Thomas both had 8. So, given the fact that he's the defenseman, Cam Fowler having 10 points in the first round is insane. And then once again, Buchnevich, Thomas, you expect them to have above point per game pace. Buchnevich, Walker, and Kyrou all had 3 goals. So we've seen a couple of those Western teams like Colorado or in Los Angeles or Minnesota have some goal scorers above 3 goals. So Blues did not have a singular player hit above 3 goals. It's still a little bit better than some of those Eastern Conference teams, but it's not where some of those other Western Conference teams are. So even though they had a couple of really good point totals from some players, it's not the best we've seen in the points and goal scoring wise. Looking at their advanced stats, they had 250 goals for, which was 13th in the NHL, 231 goals against, which was tied for 11th in the NHL. So just like the Avalanche, they had the same amount of goals against as the Avalanche did. So once again, it's not top 10, but it's very close. They're in the top half. It's not too bad there in the goals against side. Well, goal scoring wise, 250 goals for, 13th in the NHL. They are in the top half of the NHL when it comes to goal scoring. So could be better, absolutely, but it's not worse. So definitely good stuff there for St. Louis. If you look at their power play and PK wise, it wasn't overly great. They had a 22.1% power play unit, which was 16th in the NHL, and they had 74.2% PK unit, which was tied for 27th in the NHL. So they almost had a bottom 5 penalty kill unit in the regular season, while they were average on their power plays. So special teams definitely didn't do the much service this year in the regular season. In the postseason, they had a 3.86 goals for per game, which was 4th in the NHL. So that's very good stuff there. They're one of the top teams goal scoring wise. They had 3.00 goals against, which was tied for 10th, just like the Avalanche. They were 23.1% of the power play, which was tied for 7th. And they were 77.3% of the PK, which was 6th. So given all those facts, they had top half PK, a top half power play, a top half goal scoring wise. Really, the goals against was the only thing that really brought this team down. So all in all, in the playoffs, they had some pretty decent stats. So interesting note there. They currently have about $5 million in cap space for this upcoming offseason. If you look at the 3 reasons I think this team was eliminated: 1, road problems. They lost every single road game in this first round series. They lost game 1, game 2, game 5, game 7, lost it in 7. So you win one of those road games against the Winnipeg Jets, you're saying pretty. You're in the second round. But they could not win on the road for some odd reason. And that is the first reason, in my opinion, as to why this team wound up being eliminated in round 1. Second one, blew a lead. They had a chance to put away the Jets in Winnipeg in game 7. They had a 3-1 lead with 2 minutes left. I have no idea how the Blues blew that lead and did not win in overtime, maybe even, but still, I think the Blues were minutes away from advancing to round 2, and they completely blew a lead, and that's, in my opinion, the second reason why this team was eliminated. And the third one was inconsistent defending, like we talked about. They weren't the best defending team. There were some nights when Binnington was good and their defense just looked stellar. Like I said, Cam Fowler had 10 points, but there were other nights when the Blues defense looked like a team who was supposed to miss the playoffs. So I think the inconsistencies on the defending side were another reason as to why the Blues were eliminated in round 1. So in my opinion, the road problems, blowing that lead in the game 7, and the inconsistent defending were the 3 main reasons, in my opinion, why this Blues team missed the playoffs. So those are their stats, the reasons I think they were eliminated. Going over to the UFAs, RFAs, and the draft capital for St. Louis Blues. If you look at the UFAs, the RFAs, there aren't much here. UFA side, you have Fox, McEachern, and Suter. McEachern didn't play the NHL level this year. Fox had 5 goals, 15 points in 70 games, and Suter had 2 goals and 15 points in 82 games. Suter's a very older type player. Wouldn't be surprised if he retired. I don't think the Blues will bring him back even if he doesn't. You have McEachern, who's a decent depth guy, could see him be brought back on a shorter-term deal. And you have Fox, who worked out pretty well as like a 4th line center, but I could definitely see him hit free agency. So the UFAs headlined by Foxa. While on the RFA side, you have Alexandrov, Abrahamov, Skinner, Hofer, and Jurenko, Skinner, Abrahamov, Alexandrov all did not play at the NHL level this year. I could see maybe Alexandrov and 1 or 2 of those other guys we brought back. Wouldn't be surprised if 1 or 2 of those guys weren't qualified. And then you also have Hofer. Hofer had a 16-8-3 record with a 2.64 GAA, 904 save percentage. He worked worked quite well as Binnington's backup. Now, like we said, the Blues don't have too much cap space, but I definitely think they'll try and sign Hofer, and I definitely think they'll try and keep him, but I wouldn't be shocked if Hofer was maybe traded or an offer sheet candidate, but I don't think they'll lose him for nothing. So those are RFAs, definitely headlined by Hofer. If we go over to their draft capital, just like the Avalanche, not too much to talk about here. Blues have 3 picks for this upcoming offseason. They have their 1st, their 5th, and their 6th. So 3 out of 7 at least picks is not overly great for the Blues, although they were a team who made the playoffs, but still 3 picks is quite on the low side. They have their 1st, their 5th, their 6th, so they have no 2nd round pick, no 3rd round pick, no 4th round pick, and no 7th round pick. So very interesting note there. But the Blues, they do have a little bit more than the Avalanche, given the fact that they have their own 1st round pick, which is something the Avalanche do not. But still, 3 picks is not overly great for the Blues. That's how much draft capital they have. And lastly, going over to 5 things I think this Blues team should consider in the offseason to get better and maybe make it back to the playoffs and maybe make it past round 1 next year. First thing, consider moving Brayden Schenn, Mathieu Joseph, Colton Parayko, or Nick Leddy. I think that's got to be priority number 1 for the Blues. This team needs cap space. Parayko's making 6.5. Schenn's, I think, making just over 6. Joseph's making just under 3. And Leddy's making just at 4. So I think those are prime trade targets. Joseph and Leddy are both in the final year of their deals. And while Schenn and Parayko are in longer term deals, they haven't mentioned in the trade rumor mill over the past year. So we'll have to wait and see on that. But keep your eye on those 4 guys, in my opinion, as potential trade chips for the St. Louis Blues, especially given the fact that this team needs some cap space. Second priority I think this team needs to do is extend Holloway and Fowler. The way Fowler played in those playoffs, I would be shocked if the Blues were not trying to sign him. He's making, I think, $6.25 million. I think it's like 4.5 because the Ducks are retaining some for this upcoming season. Then he's UFA. I think the Blues might consider trying to move a guy like Leddy or Parayko if they could extend Cam Fowler. So I have to wait and see on that. Well, Holloway has been a very great offer sheet candidate by the St. Louis Blues. Targeted him in the offer sheet market, got him, and he has worked out phenomenally for the St. Louis Blues. He's in the final year of his deal. I think extending him is going to be a big piece there for the St. Louis Blues. So in my opinion, I think extending Holloway and Fowler are big pieces for the St. Louis Blues. Third thing has to be give some more of the younger guys some more playing time. A guy like Jimmy Snuggerud, a guy like Zach Dean, Dalibor Dvorsky, and Zach Bolduc, I think should all be potentially NHL regulars the coming season. I wouldn't be surprised if maybe only 2 or 3 of them were, but I think some of those young forwards deserve some looks at the NHL level, so we'll have to wait and see on that. That's more of a training camp thing, but definitely think it's something that the Blues should consider. Fourth thing this team needs to do is add some depth on the blue line, as we just talked about. I could see a move a guy like Parayko or Leddy, especially if they moved one of those 2 guys. I think they could be in the market for some depth defensemen, especially with some veteran guys, especially if a guy like Ryan Suter winds up leaving. So I don't know exactly who they could try and target, like a guy like maybe John Merrill or Jeff Petrie. I'm not exactly sure who they could definitely try and target, but I think some cheaper depth defensemen is another priority for the St. Louis Blues. And the 5th priority has to be add 1 or 2 middle 6 forwards. Like I think, especially if they were to move off some of their guys like a Brayden Schenn, there's a couple of other guys like Alex Texey who's a year away from RFA status and things like that. Like I definitely think adding maybe 1 to 2 middle 6 forwards to sort of try and round out that team would be a very smart move there for the Blues, but probably have to be on the cheaper side with how much cap space they have right now. So very interesting stuff there for the Blues, but I think considering moving Schenn, Joseph, Parayko, or Leddy, extending Holloway and Fowler, giving guys like Snuggerud, Dean, Dvorsky, and Bolduc NHL time, adding some depth on the blue line, and adding 1 to 2 middle 6 forwards are 5 ways I can see this Blues team improving in the offseason to maybe finally make it out of round 1 and make it back to round 2 for the 2019 Stanley Cup champions. So definitely, in my opinion, that's what I think of the Avalanche. That's what I think of the Blues. I love your guys' thoughts. Are you surprised by any of the UFAs, RFAs, the draft capital, how these teams did this past season? And do you agree with me with the 5 ways that these 2 teams can improve in the offseason to get better for next year? Or do you think there are other ways that these 2 teams can improve in the offseason? Definitely let me know your thoughts on all of that down in the comment section below. That is all I'm going to talk about for today. Remember to like this video. And for the other team, subscribe below. Thank you for all of your support. I would never do this if you guys were on the road to 500 subscribers. So if you haven't already, hit the subscribe button, leave a comment. And don't forget to stay tuned for my June 27th, June 28th, and July 1st live streams. I also do a blog to news, rumors, analysis, stuff like that. So check that out. The link to that down in the description below. Cannot wait to see you guys all for the next video. See you guys soon.